turn back to our prayer books now, to page 138, as we prepare to meet the Sabbath bride with L'cha Dodi. If you're in your virtual prayer book, it's page 38. Ya la 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 L'cha Dodi. Ya la 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 likrat kala. Ya la 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 b'nei Shabbat nekavela. Ya la 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 L'cha Dodi. Ya la 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 likrat kala. Ya la 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 b'nei Shabbat nekavela. Shamor v'zachor b'diborecha ishmi'anu el hamiuchad Adonai echad u'shemo echad l'shem u'tiferet v'litila. Ya la 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 L'cha Dodi. Ya la 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 likrat kala. Ya la 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 b'nei Shabbat nekavela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha ki makor habaracha merosh mikedem nesucha sof ma'aseh b'machshava tefila. Ya la 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 L'cha Dodi. Ya la 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 likrat kala. Ya la 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 b'nei Shabbat nekavela. Hitoreri kivaorei kumiori uri shir daberi kevod Adonai alayich nigla. Ya la 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 L'cha Dodi. Ya la 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 likrat kala. Ya la 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 b'nei Shabbat nekavela. Boi v'shalom ateret bala. Gam b'simcha u'v'tzola toch emunei am sigula. Boi chala, boi chala. Ya la 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 L'cha Dodi. Ya la 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 likrat kala. Ya la 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 b'nei Shabbat nekavela. We yearn, we approach, we pause. We began our service this evening with Yedid Nefesh. Oh God, how I yearn for you. My heart leaps in anticipation of our meeting. We approached with Lecha Dodi, stepping closer to unification with God as depicted with the image of the Sabbath bride. And now, with Chatzi Kaddish, we pause. The Kaddish serves as a divider between our introductory prayers and the formal call to prayer, between our approach and our union, between the preface and the moment. We pause right here where we are before we truly begin to offer words of prayer for all that we have and all that God is. We continue with a Chatzi Kaddish on page 144. Yitkadal ve'yitkadash shemei Rabbah Be'alma divarach hirutei ve'yamlich malchutei B'chayeichon u'v'yomeichon u'v'chayedecho Beit Yisrael Bagala u'vizman kariv ve'imeru Amen. Yehei Shemei Rabbah Mevorach Le'olam Ulal Me'amaya Yitbarach Yibarach V'yishtabach V'yipa'ar V'yitromam V'yinaseh V'yithadar V'yitaleh V'yitalal Shemei Dekucha Barichu Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tush b'chata v'nechamata da'amiran b'alma ve'imeru Amen. We rise for the Baruch Hu, page 146. Continue together in the Hebrew, page 148. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech ha'olam, asher bidvaro ma'ariv aravim, bechochma poteach she'arim, uvitvuna meshane itim, umachalif et hazmanim, umesader et hakochavim, bemishmerotehem barakia kirtsono. Borei yom v'layla, golel or mipnei choshech, v'choshech mipnei or, uma'avir yom umevi layla, umavdil bein yom uvein layla, Adonai tzvaot shemo. El chai v'kayam, tamid yimloch alenu la'olam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai, hama'ariv aravim. We continue now on page 677, with Open Up Our Eyes, or if you're in the virtual prayer book, on page 373. Open up our eyes, teach us how to live, fill our hearts with joy and all the love you have to give. Gather us in peace as you lead us to your name, and we will know that you are one. Open up our eyes, teach us how to live, fill our hearts with joy and all the love you have to give. Gather us in peace as you lead us to your name, and we will know that you are one. And we will know that you are one. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. 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 Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Please be seated. We continue with the Ve'ahavta on page 154. Page 154. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol me'odecha ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam b'shiftecha b'veitecha u'v'lechtecha v'derech u'v'shochbecha u'v'kumecha u'kshartam le'ot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot beineinecha u'chtavtam al mezuzot beitecha u'visharecha למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. Page 61. Oh no, I'm sorry. That was the wrong page. Page 158 will be our next prayer. My eyes jumped, I'm sorry. Before we join together in the Michamocha, I'd like to share a poem from an older book called The Gates of the House. It's a poem by Rabindranath Tagore from his collection of poems Gitanjali. Where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls, where words come from the depths of truth, where tireless striving stretches its arms toward perfection, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way in the arid desert sands of dead habit, where the mind is led forward by you into ever-widening thought and action, to that heaven of freedom, my maker, let my people awake.
Adonai Jacob, וגלו מיד חזק ממנו, ברוך אתה אדוני, גאל ישראל.
We read together on page 161. Give us a place to rest, Adonai our God. Bring us into shelter in the soft, long evening shadows of your truth. For with you are true protection and safety, and in your presence are acceptance and gentle love. Watch over us as we go forth. Prepare for us as we return. Spread over us your shelter of peace, over all we love, over our Jerusalem and yours. Baruch atah Adonai, haporei sukat shalom aleinu, ve'al kol amo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim. Ve'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, לעשות את השבת לדורותיו, בריחו
אותי לעולם. כי ששת ימים עשה את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת שבת וינפש, שבת שבת וינפש. Shabbat, Shabbat vayinafash. Shabbat, Shabbat
As we sit in the joy of Shabbat, let us pause for this poem, Contraband, by Denise Levertov. The tree of knowledge was the tree of reason. That's why the taste of it drove us from Eden. That fruit was meant to be dried and milled to a fine powder for use a pinch at a time, a condiment. God had probably planned to tell us later about this new pleasure. We stuffed our mouths full of it, gorged on but and if and how, and again but, knowing no better. It's toxic in large quantities. Fumes swirled in our heads and around us to form a dense cloud that hardened to steel, a wall between us and God, who was paradise. Not that God is unreasonable, but reason in such excess was tyranny and locked us into its own limits, a polished cell reflecting our own faces. God lives on the other side of that mirror, but through the slit where the barrier doesn't quite touch the ground, manages still to squeeze in as filtered light, splinters of fire, a strain of music heard, then lost, then heard again. We rise for the tefillah on page 164.
Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, ve'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, Ve'konei HaKol, Ve'zocher Chastei Avot Ve'imahot, U'mevi Geula Livnei V'neihem, Lama'an Shemo Be'ahava, Melech Ozer U'Moshia U'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham, Ve'ezrat Sarah, Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechayei HaKol Atah Rav Lehoshia, Mechalkel Chayim Bechesed, Mechayei HaKol Berachamim Rabim, Somech Noflim Verofei Cholim, umatir hasurim, umkayem emunato lishenei afar, michamocha ba'al gevurot, umido melach, melech memit umchaya, umatzmiach Yeshua, v'ne'eman atah hachayot hakol, baruch atah Adonai, mechayeh hakol. Atah kadosh v'shimcha kadosh, u'kdoshim b'chol yom yahalalucha selah. Baruch atah Adonai, ha'el hakadosh. You may be seated. We continue on page 173. We read together. May these hours of rest and renewal open our hearts to joy and our minds to truth. May all who struggle find rest on this day. May all who suffer find solace. May all who hurt find healing on this day. May all who despair find purpose. May all who hunger find fulfillment on this day. And may this day fulfill its promise. Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat. Page 175. You are with us in our prayer, our love and our doubt, in our longing to feel your presence and do your will. You are the still, clear voice within us. Therefore, O God, when doubt troubles us, when anxiety makes us tremble, when pain clouds the mind, we look inward for the answer to our prayers. There may we find you, and there find courage, insight, and endurance. And let our worship bring us closer to one another, that all Israel and all who seek you may find new strength for your service. Baruch atah Adonai, she'otcha levadcha b'yir'ah na'avod. We join together in Shalom Rav, page 178. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Ki atahu melech Adon l'chol hashalom. Ki atahu melech Adon l'chol hashalom. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. V'tov beinecha levared et Amcha Yisrael bechol עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Tasim Leolam. Tasim Leolam.
think now of those in our congregational family who are in need of healing, of mind, body, and spirit. We think also of those who are ill with COVID-19, their families, and their caregivers. If you have the name of a loved one you'd like to mention for Mi Sheberach, I invite you to do so now. David Scheibel. We pray for healing for all who are in need as we join together in Mi Sheberach on page 371, or in the virtual prayer book, page 271.
Makor habracha leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Mi sheberach imotenu, makor habracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen.
We pause now for a moment of silent prayer.
Oh, say shalom, shalom bimromav. Uya say shalom aleinu. Ve'al Israel ve'imru amen. We say shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Amen. Oh, say shalom, shalom bimromav. Uya say shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen. Ve'al Israel. Amen. Tanya Streeter is a world champion free diver. She was born in the Cayman Islands, grew up in England, currently lives in the US in Austin, Texas. As Streeter explained in her 2012 TED Talk, free diving is basically taking a big breath, diving as deep as you can in the ocean, and returning to the surface safely. Free divers don't use scuba equipment. They train through various techniques to increase the body's breath capacity and ability to hold the breath for longer durations of time. Some free divers can hold their breath longer than 10 minutes and have increased their lung capacities to be twice what an average human's might be. When Streeter began free diving at age 25, she almost immediately began to break records. In 2002, she set her sights on smashing a free diving world record in an event called No Limits by attempting to dive to a depth of 525 feet. For us mere mortals that don't have an understanding of that ocean depth, she explains that a depth of 525 feet is beyond the crushing depth of World War II submarines. In the minutes before the dive, Streeter began to prepare by doing a special kind of breathing that is designed to draw a lot of oxygen into the lungs so that she can hold her breath for the duration of the 3.5 to 4 minute dive and equalize the pressure during the descent. Free divers use a technique called packing to do this, which means that after they take the breath, they suck a little more air in a few times, packing it into the lungs. Streeter says this technique is risky, but it is necessary to perform the dives. The risk is that if a diver overpacks their lungs, it restricts the activity of the heart, which then cannot pump oxygenated blood to the brain. This results in the person blacking out. And this is exactly what happened to Streeter on the day she was attempting her world record dive. Streeter says that free divers are very tuned into their breath because it is what makes their sport possible. They spend time training so that their physiology adapts to diving in the depths. They need to know and understand the workings of their bodies and be able to trust their own physical cues. But on this occasion, even though she usually knew her limits, she made a mistake. This week's Torah portion is Bahar Bechukotai, and I will be focusing on the first part of this double portion, Parashat Bahar. Bahar tells us of many rules pertaining to how we farm the land and how we treat the people and animals that are part of our community. This collection of laws is called the laws of Shemitah, the laws of letting the land rest. The Torah tells us that we should plant our crops and harvest them for 6 years, and then let the land rest in the 7th year. Additionally, once we have counted this cycle of 7 years 7 times, the 50th year is another special year of rest known as the Jubilee year. This ancient wisdom tells us something we know to be true today, and that we continue to learn with each passing day. The land has its limits. If you garden, you know that often the same planting practices and techniques can lead to very different results. We do not have control over the land's resources, the weather, or the animals living in our area who like to snack on our gardens. If we plant the same things in the same soil over and over, the soil becomes depleted of the essential nutrients that help our plants grow. The land has limits, and trying to push it beyond its limits will not yield results. We cannot will something to happen when the resources are simply not there. As people, we certainly also have our limits. When we try to push them too far, the results we seek are not attained. But when we do not test our limits, we also get no results. For Tanya Streeter, the limits she pushed the day of her world record attempt could have been disastrous. After her brief episode accidentally blacking out, she did quickly regroup and try again. On her second try, she was only able to quickly breathe in to about 80% of her breath capacity, under her limit. But she dove anyway. She felt pressured by the team all around her who was prepared to support her, and by the opportunity that was presenting itself before her. Her breath wasn't big enough to equalize as quickly as normal. And when she got to her depth of 525 feet, she developed narcosis, a condition that can impair judgment. She momentarily forgot one of the important steps she needed to take to ascend out of the water. But soon, the gravity of her situation jolted her into remembering the step, and she successfully completed her dive and broke the record. Some other freedivers have not been so lucky. Staying safe while freediving is entirely dependent on knowing the limits of your own body. And while Tanya Streeter's world record dive attempt had a happy ending, it took her 10 years to speak about the dive publicly. She says that it was very hard for her to accept that the line between pushing hard and pushing too hard became blurred for her. The lines of our limits and the limits of the world around us are what define our experience. The challenge of finding those limitations and knowing when to abide by them and when to try to push or expand them is the stuff that makes up our lives, our everyday decisions, our long-term goals, our relationships, and our legacies. When we push ourselves or our loved ones, we can learn and grow and expand our horizons. But when we push too hard, we can pressure or hurt or exhaust ourselves and those around us. We must pursue our limits in order to find meaning, but when we hit those limits, we must also know how to react to those signals that it is time to stop, to take a break, to take a breath. Our Torah portion defines very clear and generous limits for the land. 1/7 of the time, the land is to rest. And in that rest, it regains balance to be productive for the next 6 years. That year of rest is called Shabbat Ladonai, a Sabbath or rest for God. That somehow in that rest, holiness lies in the fields. In that time, the fields are free to grow what they might, or not to return to the state of being wild naturally, and humans are not to interfere. We often are not so generous about limits with ourselves and our loved ones. Like Tanya Streeter, it is easy to feel pushed beyond our limits by perceived pressure from outside or within. May we learn from the guidance of this week's Torah portion to carefully evaluate what is possible, to find our limits, perhaps to push them at times, but to be able to discern when it is time to stop, and be able to find God in that state of rest and renewal. Ken Yehi Ratzon. A few announcements this evening. Here at the temple, we have a lot going on this spring. Let me tell you all about it. Tomorrow morning, same place, right here, we are going to have special Shabbat service for only people who are fully vaccinated and 2 weeks after their second vaccination. This is to create a safe and comfortable space for the most vulnerable in our community who are only comfortable being around those who are immunized. 10:30 tomorrow morning, everybody is welcome as long as you show your vaccination card at the door. So hope to see you here. Next Friday evening, Shabbat services will take place at 6 p.m. and Rabbi Weinstein will be back on the bima. Confirmation this year will be held on Erev Shavuot, which is Sunday, May 16th at 7 p.m. And we send a warm mazel tov to Esther Goldstein, Noah Hamilton, Zach Kalnes, Jude Lingen, and Marnie Nussbaum, who are our confirmands this year. Everybody is welcome to join us for the confirmation service, May 16th at 7 p.m. Our new mindfulness program is kicking off at the end of this month. The Gift of Mindfulness. First class is going to be Wednesday, May 26th, starting at 7 p.m. It will consist of meditation, Jewish text, conversation, and real-life practice. You do not need any mindfulness experience to attend this or even know what mindfulness is. If you're curious, all you have to do is show up, May 26th at 7. We are taking reservations for the very important event, Rabbi Weinstein's Bon Voyage Shabbat service. It's coming up. Friday, June 18th. Reservations are a must and will be filled on a first-come, first-served basis. Social distancing and masks will be mandatory for the entire evening. And save the date also, Saturday, June 5th, for Shabbat morning yoga with me and Amy Saltstein. We will continue now with the Aleinu, which you can find on page 586 in the prayer book, page 586, or if you are online with us in your virtual prayer book on page 300. Please rise.
Aleinu leshabeach ladon hakol, lateif gedula liotzer bereshit, shelo asanu kigoyei haratzot, velo samanu kamishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkeinu kahem, vegor aleinu kechol hamonam. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד.
Please be seated. We continue on page 593. The light of life is a finite flame. Like the Shabbat candles, life is kindled, it burns, it glows, it is radiant with warmth and beauty. But soon it fades, its substance is consumed, and it is no more. In light we see, in light we are seen. The flames dance, and our lives are full. But as night follows day, the candle of our life burns down and gutters. There is an end to the flames. We see no more, and are no more seen, yet we do not despair, for we are more than a memory slowly fading into the darkness. With our lives, we give life. Something of us can never die. We move in the eternal cycle of darkness and death, of light and life. At this time in our Shabbat service, we think especially of Adele Himmler, who passed away in the past month, and for whom the period of Shloshim is still being observed. We think also of those whose yahrzeit, the anniversary of death, falls on this Shabbat: Abraham Boehm, Daniel Britz, Charlotte Kahn, Alice Davis, Roy C. Davis, Sarah Bell Davis, Roxine Fain, Paula Phlox, June Gertz, Elsie F. Goldman, Irving E. Goldman, Eva Hatner, Sophia H. Lempert, Anne Levine, Philip Levy, Fanny Bass Lebov, Phil Liebes, Harry Lowenthal, Jenny Snyder Miller, Ruth Myers, Donald M. Russell, Ethel N. Schwartz, Edward Sklar, Samuel Solomon, Gail Waldstein, and Eugene Wasserman. We rise now as one community and turn to page 598 in the prayer book, page 598, or the virtual prayer book, page 312, and join together to recite the Kaddish Yatom, the mourner's Kaddish. Yit Gadal v'yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah, Belma Divarach Hirute v'yamlich Malchute, B'chayei Chon u'v'yomei Chon u'v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala u'vizman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehei Shemei Rabbah mevarach le'olam u'lalmei almaya, Yit barach v'yish tabach v'yipa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, V'yit hadar, v'yit alev, v'yit halal, shemei dekudsha, b'richu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechamata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shalom araba min shamaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu yaseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn and comfort to all who are bereaved. And we say together, amen. You may be seated. Our closing song is on your song sheet. It's on the back of the song sheet, actually. In our service this evening, we've examined ideas about limits, borders, and boundaries. But we will close with a song called Beyond, a song about God who is, of course, limitless. I'm going to begin with the chorus so you can hear how it goes. It's very easy. I think you'll catch on very quickly. And let us say, Amen. And let us say, Amen. May your wonder be celebrated. May your name be consecrated. May your brilliance never fade from the magnificent world you made. May your ways prevail in our own days, in our own lives, and in the life of all Israel. And let us say, Amen.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I invite you to turn now in your prayer book to page 123 so we can join together in Kiddush. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho be'ahava uvratzon hinchilanu zikaron lema'aseh v'reishit ki hu yom techilah lemikra'ei kodesh zecher litziat mitzrayim ki vanu v'acharta ve'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim ve'shabbat kodshecha be'ahava uvratzon hinchaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat. Amen. L'chaim. And we join together in Motzi. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. Shabbat shalom.